Yachiyamo, greetings. I say we thank everybody for tuning in. We're going to give people a few minutes to get in. Let me know in the chat room if you can hear me and see clearly. Yachiyamo, greetings. I say we thank everybody for tuning in. We're going to give people a few minutes to get in. Let me know in the chat room if you can hear me and see clearly. Yachiyamo, greetings. I say we thank everybody for tuning in. We're going to give people a few minutes to get in. Let me know in the chat room if you can hear me and see clearly. Greetings. I say we thank everybody. Okay, so we're on YouTube as well as Zoom, so we had a little feedback, but we took care of that. So we're going to start in like 2 minutes. Just want to make sure people can get in on Zoom. All right. I'm going to pull up one more document and we'll be straight. Okay, so your GMO greetings. I say we thank everybody for tuning in. My name is Odwirafo Kwesi Ranehmpata Akan, Odwirafo of Akwamu Mine and Marukati Vimudi Akwamu Nation in North America within Ojira Mine, the purified nation, Afurakani, Afurakaini people, African Black people in the Western Hemisphere. So we have some information that we wanted to share with regard to what we call in the Akan tradition ADEBISA, which is divination. There are various forms of divination in Afurakani, Afurakaini, meaning African ancestral religious practices, inclusive of our expressions of ancestral religion in the Western Hemisphere, in North America. For example, the hoodoo tradition, as we talk about, is the Akan tradition preserved in the blood circles of Akan people in North America for the past 300 plus years. We have various forms of ADEBISA, divination, and as well as in the Juju tradition, which is the Yoruba tradition, the voodoo tradition, which is the Eve and Phone tradition in North America, the Ngangan tradition, which is the Fang tradition in North America, the Wanga tradition, which is the Ovambo tradition, and so forth. So we have various expressions of ancestral religion preserved in our blood circles here in North America, and we have various forms of divination that we continue to utilize. So the pendulum, the use of the pendulum, is a very popular form of divination that's been used throughout North America amongst Afurakani, Afurakaiti, African Black people. It's a simple form, even when we were forced into the Western Hemisphere, and let's say we didn't have access to cowrie shells, which we call nserewa, in Akan, if we didn't have access to cowrie shells, if we didn't have access to certain implements that we would normally utilize for the ADEBISA process, the divination process, we utilize things that we had access to here in North America. Plant life, mineral life, animal life, certain bones and so forth, teeth, whatever it is from certain animals that we utilize, we find out. For example, possum bones utilized in divination in North America, in the hoodoo tradition. There are no possums in the region of what is now Ghana and Ivory Coast in the western part of the continent of Africa, but we come into North America, we escape from enslavement, we establish independent settlements and so forth, and we use the nature, the life in nature in the region that we find ourselves in on this region of the Earth Mother. We see certain animals we've never seen before. So what do? We inquire to the abosom, the forces in nature, as to which divinity, which one of you abosom, forces in nature, deities, govern this particular animal that we've never seen before. When they show us that this is their specific child, so to speak, and they're up under this, the jurisdiction of this specific divinity, then they let us know how we can utilize the certain parts of the animal, bones and so forth, for divination. Now, so, and this is one of the ways that we find out. The same thing with other elements, mineral life, certain plant life that we've encountered that we were not familiar with on the continent. Certain things, of course, we see that are the same and certain things that are not the same. Certain plants and, minerals and so forth that are recognizable. Certain plant life, of course, exists here that doesn't exist on the continent, but we learned how to incorporate that in our practice. And that is not a new thing. When we migrated from ancient Kamit and Kamit Nubian Egypt to the western part of the continent over 2,000 years ago to establish the ancient empire of Akana, later called the Empire of Ghana, those of us who are descended from that specific group, we had to adjust to that region in the, near the Sahara Desert and so forth. And plant life, animal life, mineral life, and so forth that we encountered there, we incorporated that as part of our ritual practice. When we moved 1,000 years later from that region further south towards the forest belt and savanna region and so forth, in the region of today's Ghana and Ivory Coast, we had to incorporate that plant life, animal life, and mineral life that existed in the forest, some of which didn't exist in the savanna and desert regions that we came from, that we spent 1,000 years in those areas. So adapting to our environment is part of our ancestral religious practice. We align ourselves with the Earth Mother divinities, Asase Afua, the fertile Earth Mother, Asase Ya, the barren Earth Mother, and so forth. And we learn directly from her the nature and function of the various forms of plant life, animal life, mineral life, and how we are to harmonize with them, as well as other abosom forces in nature who govern various aspects of creation. So this adaptation process, that's just part of ancestral religion. So of course we continued that process even when we were forced into North America against our will, and then we freed up, many of our people waged war against the whites in our offspring, freed themselves, established independent sovereign settlements for, generations, and forced the end of enslavement. So we want to talk about this notion of the pendulum, one of the popular forms of divination. Now, hold on one second, let me see. Okay. So when you see the image that we utilize for the promotional piece for the broadcast, you see the term Tekh, and Tekh is a term from ancient Kamit and Kemet, ancient Nubian Egypt. And the Tekh in this context, expand this a little bit, we say the weighing of the heart. Second. So you see the weighing of the heart ceremony here, and you see the divinity Anpu. You see the scale, the heart being weighed against the feather of Maat. And then you see that there's a plummet, which we call Tekh in ancient Kemet, and he's looking at the plummet, and he's quote unquote reading the plummet. It's hanging, and you see the divinity here, the form of the divinity, the sacred animal totem of the divinity Maat, the male divinity Maat, who's the counterpart to the female divinity Maat. You see him as Maat, Judge Maat, the little baboon divinity and so forth, sitting at the equilibrium point of the scale. And you see hanging from the little lip right here is the Tekh, or the plummet. Anpu is reading the plummet as the scales are balancing and so forth. And what happens is when you transition, when you make transition, you'll see this weighing of the heart to determine whether or not your heart is as light as a feather. The feather is representative of the divinity Ma'at, divine law and balance and so forth. If you engage in disordered behavior, you notice that if you have anxiety or tension, or you're in some disordered state, you have a quote unquote heavy heart. But when you live in harmony with order, you're not holding on to discordant energy and so forth, and your heart is light. So if you're holding on to disordered and discordant energy because you've engaged in self-destructive behavior or malicious behavior and so forth, or lustful behavior and so forth, then your heart stores that, your spiritual heart. So just like you have a physical body and you have a spirit that animates the body, you have a physical brain, you have a spiritual force that animates the brain, which is called Ka, and Ka'et in ancient Kamit, we call it Akra, the soul, the divine consciousness, the Krawa in Akan. It is the Ordiri Inu in the Yoruba tradition, the divinity that governs the head. It's the Selido in Vodun and the Chi in Igbo and so forth. You have the spiritual force that pulls you in your head region towards thoughts, intentions, and actions that are in harmony with divine order. And it also disinclines you from thoughts, intentions, and actions that are out of harmony with divine order. So just like you have a physical brain that regulates all functions in the body, you have a spiritual force that animates the brain. That spiritual force, that spirit brain, is the Ka, the soul, the divine consciousness, the divinity in your head region. You have a heart that regulates the flow of blood and therefore the life force energy that's, sent all throughout the body and so forth. But you have a spiritual force, radiant, seated in the heart region. That is your spiritual heart, or Ab, as it's called in ancient Kemet. And that spiritual heart is weighed against the feather of Ma'at. And you see Anpu looking at the Tekh, the plummet, reading the Tekh to see, to determine the law of balance. How far off are you? Are you balanced? If you balance your heart with the feather, meaning your heart is as light as a feather, then you can pass on to the ancestral community, the pristine ancestral community, and live amongst your honorable, venerable Shepsu, Shepsatu, or Nananom Nsamanfo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, as we call them in Akan, or the Egungun, the spiritually cultivated class of ancestresses and ancestors. It's called in the Yoruba tradition. They call it Shepsu or Shepsatu in ancient Kemet, which is the title for venerable ancestresses and ancestors, or the Aku, Akutu, the illuminated ones and so forth. So different titles, but all of our ancestral religious, practices, no matter what group we come from, we have a specific class of spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, those who lived in harmony with divine order on earth, and therefore they are qualified to function as guides to us, people in their clans, to guide us in harmony with divine order as we live on earth and so forth, but we live in that community if our heart balances the feather. So that not only takes place after death, that scene where you're standing before the scale of, judgment and so forth happens every time you make a decision. If you're about to make a decision, then you're at the scale at that point. You place your heart against the feather. Are you about to make a decision that's in harmony with divine order? If you do, then things will work out in a harmonious way. If the scale is tilted because you're weighed down by lust or malice or discordant energy and so forth, you make a decision that's discordant, disordered, and that will manifest in some way in your life. So let's give a larger view of that. Hold on one second. Let me pull up this. So here's the full scene. Now, this particular scene is from the papyrus of Ani, or Anui, in ancient Kamit. Now, you'll see the specific divinities who are judges at the weighing and so forth. Let me just move this over a little bit. Okay. So you'll see here, you'll see Ra, the solar disk on his head. You'll see Atem, Shu, Tefnut, Geb, Nut, Aset, and Nebuchadnezzar. You have Heru, then you have Heru, and then you have Hu and Sia, and those dealing with divine utterance and wisdom and so forth. And we'll get into who those divinities are. But here you have the image of this papyrus found in the tomb of the man Anui or Ani who transitioned. When he transitioned and mummified and so forth, and buried and so forth, this particular papyrus is placed in his tomb. This is why some of them call it the Book of the Dead. It's the Book of Coming Forth by Day, or Runu Pert Im Heru and so forth. But placed in the tomb and so forth, it has ritual incantations that are chanted, ritual song, ritual prayer and so forth, ritual chant to assist the deceased individual to make their way to the ancestral community without being ensnared by discarnate, wayward spirits that are earthbound who have not been able to make their transition to the ancestral community. And just to give a point on that, this is not a symbolic thing. When you transition, it's no different than if you have a family reunion. We always use this example. And it's a big house and all the family members are there and so forth, cousins and aunts and uncles and grandparents and everything else. If there's somebody in the family who's known to be a, drug addict who's stealing and, attacking people and robbing and everything else, when they attempt to come into the, sanctuary, everybody will coalesce and will not allow them in the sanctuary. They're forced out. They can't dwell amongst the people who are living in harmony. They're forced out. The same thing happens. So they're on the street, they're transient, they're attacking people, causing people problems, harassing people and so forth for years and years and years on the street and so forth. When someone transitions, when your spirit leaves the body and your body is interred and so forth, buried, you are either going to be drawn to this pristine community of your Nananon Saman for your spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, meaning your great-great-great-grandparents, grandfathers, grandmothers who lived in harmony with divine order, and you'll live in the spiritual community. In the Akan tradition, there's a proverb that states, if you want to know what Asamando, the ancestral realm, is like, then consider the dream state. Now, hold on one second. When you're dreaming, of course, your body is laying in a dark place, no light, no sound, no movement, but you're having experiences. You're engaging other individuals, entities, and so forth. Even though your eyes are closed, there's no light, sound, or darkness. When you're, when you transition, your body is laying in a cool, dark place, no light, no sound, no movement, but your spirit is engaging with other spirits. If you live in harmony with divine order, your spirit will not be repulsive to the pristine community of ancestresses and ancestors. You'll be welcomed in and you'll live in that community. No different than when you have a dream and you're interacting with relatives and so forth. It's no different than when you transition, you can interact and engage in that community for the next 100, 200 years until it's time for you to reincarnate. If you didn't live in harmony with divine order, you make yourself repulsive to that community. Just like you have two magnets on the table, when you have the light polarities facing, then they repel one another without touching. If you live in harmony with divine order, you're attractive to those who live in harmony with divine order, our people, our clans. If you live out of harmony with divine order, you make yourself repulsive, so you try to get close and you're repelled. So if you imagine a large magnet and a small magnet, it's placed close to the large one stays, solid. The small one is repelled. So if you're out of harmony with order, you're repelled. Now you become an earthbound spirit. Just like a homeless person, a transient person is just hanging around, harassing people as they walk by. An earthbound spirit that was discordant is hanging around in between, can't go to the ancestral realm, of course, can't continue to operate fully in the realm of the living and so forth. So they're constantly drawing and pulling on other individuals. When you make your transition, it's like walking from your home to a location, and if you have to walk through a number of homeless individuals or drug addicts or people who are trying to rob and steal and so forth, you have to navigate your way through that maze of individuals to get to the place you're getting to. The same thing happens when we transition. Some spirits will try to pull you off your track. When you go before the tribunal of divinities, your heart is weighed against the feather. If it's balanced, then you can be accepted amongst that pristine community. If not, you can become a transient spirit. So you see Anui here, that's his spirit, and that's his wife, and so forth. He's watching as his spiritual heart is weighed against the feather of Maat. And you see Anpu, once again, studying the swinging Tekh. And then you see Tehuti, the divinity of divine wisdom, recording the weighing. And once the record of the recording is made and so forth, then, and Anui or Ani passed that test, then the divinity Heru takes him by the hand and leads him before Alsar, who is the judge on the masculine side of the ancestral realm and so forth. And then you also have Alset and Nebet there as well. And then they welcome him into the ancestral realm. So, but the key point here is when you have the scale and you have the Tekh, that is the origin of pendulum divination. The Tekh is being weighed, is being read, the heart is being balanced against the feather, and now you have pendulum divination. Whatever is swinging is going to determine where you are spiritually, energetically, and spiritually. That's the first pendulum, and all of the pendulum forms of divination derive from this original piece. Now, what is the definition of the term Tekh? And in fact, before we get to that, let me touch on this notion of the spiritual heart first, just so you can have a better understanding. Okay. Now, this is one of our articles on our blog site, Odwirafo, which means matters of purification. So we were talking about the divinity Abba, which we call her Abba in Akan tradition. She's called Nekabet in ancient Kamit. We're talking about the divinity. We're talking about her sacred animal totem. This is Nekabet. She's Abba in Akan. She's Ayaba in Vodun. She's the female Orisha Oba in Yoruba, the first wife of Ogun and so forth. So you have Oba and Oya, who are wives of Ogun initially, but Oba, the female divinity of the home and the hearth and so forth, but also teaches, Ogun fighting techniques and so forth. That's Nekabet, but that's Abba and Akan, Nekabet and ancient Kamit. So this is her, anthropomorphic form, but then she also takes the form of the Moot, the vulture. That's her sacred animal totem, her sacred animal messenger. But in the context of, and we were talking about how she governs the respiratory apparatus and so forth. In the context of that, we were talking about the Ba and the Ba'et. Okay, so let's scroll down to that part. And what we were saying with regard to the respiratory apparatus is that when you see the heart and the lung complex, you see that when the lungs expand and contract, of course, that's the expansion and contraction, taking in air and so forth. That is the great vultures inside of your body. The breast of the bird is the heart region. The lungs are the folded down wings. And when they expand and contract, there's a great vulture sitting inside of your physical being. That's a sacred shrine for the divinity Nekabet or Abba. Now, but then we go a little bit further. We were talking about the Ba and Ba, the spirit. And then we get into so we talk about the human-headed bird, just like you have a Ka, which is the spirit's brain. So you have a spirit body, just like you have a physical body. Your spirit separates from your physical body, that spirit body Just like you have a physical body, you have a heart that sends energy through the blood to every part of the body. You have a brain that regulates every cell and every function in the body and so forth. It has a blueprint of everything that should take place. But the heart sends blood and oxygen and therefore energy to every part of the body and regulates the flow of blood and therefore life force energy to every cell in the body. And also captures the, vitiated blood and so forth. In the same fashion, you have a spirit body and you have a radiant force in the head region of the spirit body. That is your spirit's brain. That is your ka, your soul, your divine consciousness. But then you also have a ba, for males, ba'et, for females, that is the spirit. The ka is the soul, divine consciousness. The ba, or ba'et, is the spirit. It's shown as a human-headed bird, or sometimes just a bird with a bowl of burning incense with a flame arising out of it. That means your spirit is a winged, animate flame or fire. The winged or animate flame or fire, the animating fire within you. And sometimes they show it the bird with the solar disk. That means it's a winged fire or animate fire. That is your ba'et, your divine living energy that's surging throughout your system. Another expression or version of the ba, when they show the human-headed bird, is the head of the individual whose spirit it belongs to. But then we show the breakdown of the heart. So we say the physical shrine of the spirit, the ba'et, within the heart is the endocardium, and then we have the epicardium and so forth. We're going into a little bit of that now. We say as Afro-Kani people, African Black people, our spirit, our ba'et, is a divinity assigned to us by Ra and Ra'et, the creator and creatress, to dwell with us for our entire existence. It is a divinity that we can invoke to increase our vitality. It is through ritual invocation of our ba'et, meaning you can expand your life force energy through ritual breathing, through ritual movement and so forth. You can expand that fire. Even on a mundane level, when you see individuals involved in martial arts, and they expand the energy so they can break a board or a cinder block and so forth, and expand that solar force through different ritual practices and movements and so forth. You can expand or send that bird that's flying throughout your system, that solar fire energy that's expanding and contracting throughout your system. You can send that energy to your hands for martial arts and so forth, to break a board or whatever, or to engage in warfare, combat, and so forth. You can send it to your legs. You can send it to different parts of your body. That's like sending the bird out, flying out to expand that energy and so forth. So we go into a little bit more information there. You can see here the deceased individual as well as his wife. When they transition, you see the ba gets out. So you have a little bird sitting inside your chest. When the wings expand, the bird is, expanding and contracting and fanning the flames of that life force energy inside of you. When the wings, fold down and so forth, then you're at rest. That spirit comes out of you when you transition. It gets fed from the tree of the divinity Nut, and you'll see she's pouring libation to the spirit of the individual to enliven the spirit, replenish the spirit. Then the spirit gets back into the spirit body of the individual. That solar fire gets back in, just like you taking a deep breath and pulling in not only air, but solar energy. The vulture is the air, and inside of the air is the solar fire. So you have the great vulture, which is the, lungs and heart and so forth, but inside of that is the little fire bird. You have air with solar energy, you have the vulture, and inside the vulture apparatus is the little ba bird. You see the ba bird being replenished, life force energy being replenished by the divinity Nut, oxygen replenishing your body. On the spiritual side, deep breathing, through ritual movement and so forth, replenishing the life force energy within you. Now, with regard to the heart and the wing of the heart and why that's important to understand that the Ba is sitting inside, and just so you can see once again, this is the Ba and the Ba'et of the man and woman who transition, but that's the little solar bird sitting inside the larger vulture. So the vulture is the breathing apparatus, and inside that winged structure is a smaller solar bird, just like we talk about the air that you pull in. Inside the air itself is the solar energy within the air. So you have the air and the fire. You have the vulture and the solar bird, or the Ba'et. Now, just like your physical heart receives the blood through the right side of the heart, it goes to the heart-lung complex. The lung fire energy purifies and burns up all of the impurities and so forth. Then it goes back to the left side of the heart and is sent out of the left side of the heart. The left ventricle goes throughout the body, the circulatory system goes through the arteries and so forth, sends life force energy through the agency of the blood and oxygen and so forth to all the cells in the body. That's on the artery side. And then the veins capture the deoxygenated blood, as well as some of the blood that has certain debris and so forth, and brings it back to the right side of the heart so it can be purified through the heart-lung complex and then sent out the left side of the heart and so forth. And that's the whole circulatory process. So just like your heart receives the blood, processes it, and sends it out, your spiritual heart, that, spiritual force that animates the physical heart, it receives all of the projections from other entities, plant life, animal life, mineral life, afurakani, human life, the energy that you're bombarded with when you engage the world and so forth, and it captures that and processes that energy. If you're living in harmony with order, it burns out the impurities. So if people are projecting negativity towards you or any kind of negative, discordant energy, you receive that, it's impacted. You receive that in your heart, you can feel it, you feel heavy and so forth. When someone is projecting their energy towards you, all of those things are signatures that are captured, by the heart. Just like the physical heart receives the blood from the right side and so forth, and whatever impurities are in there, it captures it. But you have a lung process that burns up the impurities so clean blood can be sent back out. Your spiritual heart receives all the projections of any interaction that you've ever engaged in from the time you were born until the time you transition. You don't hold on to the impurities, but there is a record of it, just like a computer records everything and it's in the memory and so forth. Your spiritual heart is the repository for the energetic projections that you've received from every interaction. Therefore, when the spiritual heart is placed on the pan of the scale and balanced against the feather, everything that's ever taken place has been signed within the spiritual heart. Now, the things that are in harmony with order, you should have held on to, and it's harmonious. If you held on to discordant energy, whether it came from outside or some negative behaviors that you generated from inside, you engaged in disordered behavior and so forth and made that a habit or a pattern, that's held in the heart and it's weighing your heart down and it becomes heavy and so forth. That signature is there because you held on to it, and therefore you will tip the scale. So the heart is the repository not only physically of the clean blood as well as the deoxygenated blood with the debris, but the physical heart, that's the physical heart, the spiritual heart receives the energetic projections of every interaction in life. And this is why the heart is weighed against the feather. It's like the computer memory. Everything that has ever taken place is signed into the heart. So that's how you can balance it out. Now let's get to sec. So now you can see not only the importance and beyond just symbolism, but in reality, the heart being weighed against the feather of Maat, You understand that reality. And of course, as we said before, that happens at every time you make any decision, you're automatically at the weighing ceremony. You're about to go in one direction or the other. How is your heart with regard to that feather of Ma'at? Is it being measured against the standard of divine law and balance or not with regard to your decisions? Now, what is the nature of the plummet and how it is utilized within divination? Why did they use the plummet or the Tekh for that? Now, what is the definition of Tekh and what does it mean? So first we're going to look at Tekh, then we're going to look at its implications for divination. Okay, so in the Medutu, in the hieroglyphs and so forth, so you see Tekh, and you'll see the symbol, the loaf of bread and the Siev, that's the T sound, and the circular structure here, the Siev, is the K sound, so that's Tekh. And the determinative symbol are the scales with the Tekh itself. And it says the plummet or the plumb bob, but the plummet, the little weight, which served as the tongue of the scales. The term Tekh, the regulation of justice. Tekha, which is a derivation of that, where the pointer of the scales. So you have the two scales, but how do you weigh that? And that is a divinatory practice. When someone is engaged in divination in any form, you're weighing what's going on within the heart, the spiritual heart of the person, measured against the standard of divine law and balance. What you should be engaged in, what you shouldn't be engaged in. What's in harmony? We're talking about real divination. We're not talking about trying to determine if someone's gonna, try to get somebody to fall in love with them or some nonsense like that. That has nothing to do with divine order. When we engage in real divination, ADEBISA, we're engaged in a process whereby we are seeking to know what is in harmony with divine order, what is out of harmony with divine order. If we're out of harmony with divine order, how do we get back on track? The ritual incorporation of divine law, the ritual restoration of divine balance is the essence and definition of ancestral religion. We seek to align our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order every moment of every day. If we fall off track, we engage the ritual process, inclusive of ADEBISA divination, so that we can find out what's in harmony with divine order and get ourselves back on track. That's what our role is. So Tekha, derived from Tekh, the weigher, the pointer of the scales. Now you see Tekhi, the ibis, which is habui. Ibis is the Greek term. Habui is the term from ancient Kamit. That is the animal totem, the Achinebois, or animal totem of Tehuti, the divinity, as well as Seshat, the female divinity. One of the titles of Tehuti, the divinity of divine wisdom and divination, is Tekhi. Now you see the relationship between the Tekh, the plummet that you read with regard to the scales, and in this context, the spiritual heart and the feather. So that's a divinatory apparatus. When you see the scales and the Tekh, you're looking at divination. When you're measuring what's in the spiritual heart against the standard of divine law and balance, that is divination. Most people are not aware of the fact that when they just think, oh, the judgment of the dead. But what you're looking at is divination. So the divinity on the male side of divination, divine wisdom, is Tehuti. He's called Tehuti in ancient Kamit. He's also called Tekh or Tekhi in ancient Kamit. A title of Tehuti, they say Thoth, but Tehuti as regulator of the times and seasons, the cycles of creation, the order of creation. Tekhi as Tehuti is the divinity of the first month of the sacred calendar in ancient Kamit. Then you have Tekhit, the female divinity of divine law and balance, and she is the goddess of the first month. Tekhit is also a title of the female divinity of divine wisdom, Seshat, which we're going to see a little bit later. So, but you see the regulation of justice. In other words, what is in harmony with order, and that is dealing with divination. So you see Tekh is the plummet, Tekh is the symbol that is red, and dealing with the adjudication of the matter of the heart and the feather and so forth. Tekh has to do with the regulation of justice. But Tekh is also the title of the divinity, male and female, of divine wisdom. And divination. Now, so what is a plummet and what is the origin of that? What is the origin of the Tekh, and how is it utilized on a mundane fashion and therefore on the spiritual side? And of course, you can post questions in the chat room, on Zoom or on YouTube, if you're live on YouTube and so forth. We're in both right now. And we're going to get to the question and answer session. We just wanted to get through the cosmology first. Now, second, let me make sure we're not. Okay. Okay. So let's just look at what a plumb bob is. So a plumb bob or plumb bob level or plummet is a weight is a weight usually with a pointed tip on the bottom, suspended from a string and used as a vertical direction as a reference line or a plumb line. It is a precursor to the spirit level and used to establish a vertical datum. When you look at the spirit level, if you have a level when you're trying to see what's a level in construction and so forth, and in fact, let me just click on that real quick. So you've seen these. This is spirit level. People normally just say a level, bubble level. So you've seen that. If it's tilted, the little bubble will go this way. If it's tilted the other way. But of course, if you have it balanced, then it balances right in the middle, so you know something is level or not. So before these were utilized to determine if something is level or not, the plumb line was used, and it goes back to ancient Kamit and Kamit. Notice that they call the level, even the new kind of level, is called a spirit level. So it's still referencing something spiritual, even though they don't know the origins of that. But the precursor to the spirit level was the plumb bob or plumb bob level or plummet. The instrument has, and of course, as you can see already, that's a pendulum. So the instrument has been used since at least the time of ancient Egypt, ancient Kamit, to ensure that constructions are plumb or vertical. It is also used in surveying to establish the nadir, opposite of zenith, with respect to gravity of a point in space. It is used with a variety of instruments, including levels, theodolites, and steel tapes, to set the instrument exactly over a fixed survey marker or to transcribe positions onto the ground for placing a marker. But the critical piece is to establish a vertical datum. It's determining what's in balance. What's a straight line? Now, if you have a straight line, in fact, let's go down a little bit further. So you see a plumb line and the plumb on the bottom, the plummet on the bottom. Of course, you see a modern scale, plumb bob with a scale as an inclinometer and so forth. But if the plumb is hanging this way, if you have a wooden piece that's, slightly inclining and so forth, you have the plumb line straight. Now you can determine what is straight, what is the straightness, and then you can fix your implement so it can be in alignment with straight. You're using gravity. The plumb line will swing, but gravity will bring it to its equilibrium point, and then you can measure against the plumb line what's straight, what's in alignment, what's out of alignment. The plumb line will determine what's out of alignment and what's in alignment. Just like with the scale of Maat, the heart against the feather, what's out of alignment and what's in alignment. What's out of harmony with order, what's in harmony with order. Now, ancient Egyptians, the Kamit, used the plumb line attached to the top outer part of a tool resembling a letter E. When placed against the wall, the plumb line would indicate a vertical line. An A-frame level with the plumb line hung from the vertex was also used to find horizontal. Now, so that goes back to us. When we go back to, let me show you that image once again. And so this is why we utilize the image. This is one of those, this is from the tomb of Sennacherib. And you see, actually, this part is broken. So it went all the way down like a letter A and so forth, but this part is broken off, but it's still preserved. You see the plumb line and the plummet holding in the middle. If you have, swing it in one direction and so forth, if you place it near another object, you can determine what's in alignment with order and what's declining or inclining away from or towards the plumb line and so forth. You need a standard by which to measure something against. And for us, the standard is Ma'at, that which is in harmony with divine law and balance. But what does divine law and balance mean with regard to Ma'ah and Ma'at? Let's look at the definition of Ma'ah and Ma'at and see what is the standard that you're measuring something against. So in the Medutu, you'll see the term Ma'ah, to be true, to be upright, true, truthful, veritable, real, actual, and so forth. Ma'ah in the Coptic dialect is meh. Ma'ah is the masculine side. Ma'at is the feminine. So Ma'at, truth, integrity, uprightness, justice, the right, verity, genuineness, law. Then we move over. So you have, now you see the personification, and really the term is a outgrowth of the actual divinity. So Ma'ah, the God of law, order, truth, integrity. That's the male divinity of divine law and balance. And then you have Ma'at, who's the female divinity, the goddess, the personification of law, order, rule, truth, right, righteousness, canon, justice. And the important part is straightness, integrity, uprightness, and of the highest conception of physical and moral law known to the Egyptians. The reason why they have a more detailed definition is because they tended not to focus on the male divinity Ma'ah. They focus on the female divinity Ma'at. And before we go forward with that, let me just show something very quickly. And we'll just pull that out. . Okay, so this is one of the presentations we did when we did a presentation in Philadelphia in November. And the entire presentation was talking about Ma'at and Ma'at. So we did a workshop. We had a vegan lunch the way we normally do. We go to a city, we do a workshop, vegan lunch, seminar, and so forth. And we were talking about the cosmology of the divinities, and we were focused on our book, which we're going to touch on this book in a minute. This is the female divinity, Ma'at. That's one of her, expressions. And this is the male deity, Ma'at. Now, many people are unaware of the male divinity Ma'at because they simply just don't do the research. They will listen to what Europeans say, and if Europeans don't focus on Ma'at, then they don't focus on Ma'at. Just like many people don't focus on Ra'et, the creatress. They know about Ra, the creator, so they focus on Ra. But Ra'et is the creatress, and Ra is the creator. Ma'at is the male divinity of divine law. Ma'at is the female divinity of divine law. This is from the tomb of Ramesu the Sixth. This is an image of Ma'at on the wall of the tomb of Ramesu the Sixth. You can see the plinth and the sickle, which spells Ma'at, and then you have the papyrus roll, which is the determinative symbol, and so forth. This image, when you see Ma'at from Budge's dictionary, when it says U220, that means the pyramid of Unas, or the mayor of Unas, utterance 220. You'll find that reference to the male deity Ma'at. The pyramid text of P means Pepi, utterance 400. You will see the male divinity Ma'at reference there. In the pyramid text of Mer in Ra, utterance 571, you'll see a reference of the male divinity Ma'at there. Of Nefer Kara, Pepi II, utterance 1178, you'll see the reference to the male divinity Ma'at. So when you see an entry in the dictionary, you can go back to those pyramid texts and you will find the male divinity Ma'at. When we first put that information out, there were people saying, well, Ma'at doesn't exist and you just made that up, simply because they never did the actual study. But when you look at the actual references, and we've been to Kamit in the Pyramid of Teti, for example, as well, and you also see this information firsthand. And then you also see Duat 11, and you'll see a reference to the divinity Ma'at. So the 12 hours of the night in the Duat is a sacred text and so forth. And each one of the 12 hours of the night, there are different divinities in each one of the 12 hours of the night. When the sun sets and goes in the underworld and Ra is in the solar boat and so forth, moving through the 12 hours of the night. In each one of those segments, you'll see a number of different divinities. In the 11th segment, when they say Duat 11, if you look at any funerary text in Kemet, the majority of them, when you look at the 11th hour of the night and you look at the different divinities there, you will see the divinity Ma'at there to confirm that. So, the first time that I went to Kemet, and I took a trip to Kemet, the first time I went to Kemet, I went by myself. When I was in the tomb of Ramesu the Sixth, you'll see that the entire text of the Shat-n Duat, the book of what is in the underworld, is on the wall of the tomb. So when I saw the wall, I started looking for the 11th hour. And of course, it's in segments, and you'll see the first segment, second, third hour of the night, fourth, fifth. Once I got to the 11th hour, I knew that the divinity Ma'at would be in there. When I saw the divinity Ma'at, this is simply a picture I took with my iPhone of that 11th hour, so people can see the primary evidence of the male divinity Ma'at, which he's always been there, of course. And he exists in the various traditions, in the Akan tradition, in the Yoruba tradition, the male and female, as we'll see in our book, Ibeji, Orisha, that's Ma'at, and Akan is Amaria, and Amasu is Maria and Masu, which is Ma of the solar energy and Ma of the lunar energy and so forth, the watery energy and so forth. Amasu is Ma'a, and Amaria is Ma'at and so forth. All the different traditions know who Ma'a and Ma'at are. So, but what's important is this notion of straightness. Divine law, straightness, what is in harmony with divine order? What is straight? The quote unquote straight and narrow, what is level? What is straight? When you see this plinth here is an elevation of earth. And you will see the divinities standing upon the plinth. In the text of the Book of Coming Forth, or Book of Knowing the Manifestations of Ra and of Overthrowing Apep, the Nessie Men Papyrus, Atem talks about at the beginning of creation when he was completing what Ra brought into being and Ra'et brought into being. He said he couldn't find a place whereupon he could stand, so he established a firm foundation through the male divinity Ma'at, and he established that firm foundation is talking about the firming up of earth when the first landmass rose up from the surface of the water to be the first landmass of earth, the first hill and so forth, the first Ka and Kayet. Atem, operating through the red setting sun, penetrated that first landmass, that first mound, fired it up and hardened that first mound that came above the water, that became the first landmass. It became solidified and hardened and so forth. And that became the foundation upon which everything could come forth, plant life, animal life, mineral life, and so forth. And on a firm foundation, you can build a home. You can't build a home on a loose foundation. You have to have a firm, solid foundation. This elevation of earth right here, this plinth that you see Ptah standing upon and Osar standing upon, and different divinities like Su standing upon the Ma'at symbol, that is the firm, straight foundation upon which everything can be built. Ma'at is that straight foundation upon which everything is measured. When you have straightness, then you can measure how far you have declined or inclined towards or away from that which is straight, foundational, true, real, veritable, upright, and so forth. You have something to measure your actions, your thoughts, intentions, and actions against. So straightness has to do with divine order. Now, let's look at a corroboration for that in the Akan tradition. In the Akan language, and this is from one of our courses, Elemental Aestheticism in Hoodoo. And of course, Hoodoo, once again, is the Akan ancestral religion in North America. In the Akan language, you'll see that Ntang means straightness, straightly, straight, right. To be straight, but also right, correct, convenient, agreeable. And ko Ntang meaning it is not correct or not good, meaning not straight. But Ntang meaning straight is Ntang also meaning to be right or correct. That's a direct translation of Ma'at and Ma'at, meaning straight, veritable, but also truthful, real, righteous, upright, integrity. Straightness, if you're on the straight path, then you're on the right path. If you're not on the straight path, and so forth. Even in the slang that we utilize here, if someone says, is everything okay with you? You say everything is straight or straight up. You don't say everything is volatile, you say everything is straight. Because straight also means correct. Straight means in harmony with order. Straight means balanced as opposed to imbalanced. So in Akan, Ntang means straightness, but it also means right and correct. Just same thing with ancient Kamit. And then you have Attain Pa. If you see it, Attain Pa, but when Pa means good and so forth, but Attain Pa, when you combine them together, the N becomes an M sound because the N next to the P, Attain Pa. Instead of saying attain and Pa, it becomes Attain Pa, but it means good judgment, wise counsel, righteous judgment, sound judgment. Attain Bu, the act of judgment, executing judgment. So Bu, attain, meaning to execute. Bu, Ntang, judgment. That's the verb and so forth, the action. Bu attain or Bu Ntang, to execute judgment. but atembu means judgment itself, the act of judging and so forth. So ntain, meaning straight, is ntain, meaning correct, and it's also the foundation of good judgment. And then the root of that is te, to be straight, to be erect, upright, right, to be right, correct, plain, straightforward, honest, righteous. And we just saw ma'al means upright, truthful, veritable, real, straight, also having to do with divine law and judgment. Same concepts associated. And there we were talking about the ascetic tradition, and we were talking about the fire, water, earth, and air. And that's not just from the Congo tradition, the Dikinga dia Congo, which a lot of people are aware of, but that same symbolism is used in the Akan tradition. We were showing that in the sacred Okrakumwadie symbol. And we associated that, of course, with not only the solstices and equinoxes, but the midpoints of each one of those, and those are sacred midpoints. We just crossed the sacred midpoint a few days ago. So you'll see, for example, December 21st is the winter solstice. That's associated with midnight in the day cycle, rooting. We're talking about ritual ascetic, practices, dealing with diet. February 2nd is the midpoint between the solstice in winter and the spring equinox. The whites and offspring call it Groundhog's Day, but it's the midpoint, it's midwinter. It has to do with rising, and we talk about fasting. So we were talking about the ascetic tradition. In the Hoodoo tradition, we deal with ritual movement, meditation, exercise, balance, sexual activity, abstinence, diet, fasting, the expansive and contractive aspects of these practices. On one hand, we engage in certain kinds of dietary practices that are purificatory. That's on the expansive side. On the contractive side of diet is fasting. On procreative activity, sexual activity with your spouse and so forth. On the expansive side, also for ritual purposes, to harness the Bayat energy for a specific purpose. On the contractive side of that procreative activity or sexual activity is abstinence, that ascetic practice. On the expansive side, dealing with exercise and utilizing your muscle groups and so forth. For example, the kind of martial activity like martial arts or qigong and so forth, or different kinds of things. The contractive side is ritual balance. You see someone stand on one leg or other forms of balancing. You have to balance yourself on one leg. You have to send that energy to the vestibular system, the balancing system, the dual hall of Maat in the inner ear that balances you out. You send that energy there to balance yourself. And then we have ritual movement and meditation. These are the expansive and contractive expressions of asceticism. They're associated with the equinoxes and solstices, but also the midpoints between. For example, this would be the sunrise, but also the spring equinox, the summer solstice, noon, autumn equinox, September 22nd, December 21st, also, midnight and so forth. And this is like the evening. That's, winter solstice. But then you have the midpoints. If this is the winter solstice, like midnight, then this is February 2nd, the midpoint between the solstice and the spring equinox. So we went through that in that particular piece. But the key point is straightness is associated with divine law and balance, what is correct, what is in harmony with divine order. So if you have a plumb line, dealing with that which is straight, now you can measure things against what's straight. When you have a pendulum, you're measuring the energetic output, what's in your thoughts, intentions, and also actions. Is it in alignment? When you have the pendulum swinging and so forth, is it moving in a fashion that reflects divine order with regard to what is your energetic output or not? Now that we have that understanding, and we understand that once again, let me pull this back up, the image back up. Now that we understand that the wing of the heart is a pendulum form of the original form of pendulum divination. Now you can look at what people typically say is the definition of pendulum divination, that we're going to get into divination. So in general, you just saw the plumb line from ancient Kamit. Now you see that same plumb line been used for thousands of years. That comes from our people, thousands of years ago. And you find the same thing, even the swinging to a certain extent of the Okwele chain in the Yoruba tradition and the Dafa, Ifa divination and so forth, that's associated with that as well. So what would they say is a pendulum? A symmetrical weighted object that is hung from a single chain or cord, never made of a magnetic substance, often crystal. It's also possible to use objects such as a favorite trinket bead or metal ball or even a key. The pendulum is a very simple tool and one that lets the user tune into their intuitive powers. Pendulum acts as a receiver and transmitter of information that moves in different ways in response to questions. So that's what they're dealing with. But with regard to us, we're always dealing with specifically, when you're talking about the divinity that governs the head, your krawad, the ka'et, the divinity in the head region that governs you. And let's show an image of that real quick from our webpage. Okay, so in our AKRADINBOSOM page, we're talking about, in the Akan tradition, the deities, the Abosom, the forces in nature that govern the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that govern the 7-day week cycle. So when you learn about Akan people being named Kwesi and Kwame and Kojo and Akosua and Kwabena, Abena, Afua, Kofi, and so forth, we're not just named after the days of the week, but the deities that govern the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that govern the 7-day cycle. We have a chart that we created. So we show the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies and the male and female divinities that govern them. We show their forms in ancient Kemet. And then we also show their forms in the Akan tradition, the sacred, ritual sculptures and so forth. So you'll see Awusi, which is Alsar, Awusir, Ajwa, which is Alset, Abena, which is Sekhmet, also called Sechima in Akan, which is Sechimet in ancient Kemet. Bena, which is Heru Bedat, or Heru Bedat, Heru Bedat, or Heru Bedat. He's called Bena in Akan, or Heru Bedat in ancient Kemet. Akul, which is Nebuchadnezzar. Awuku, Anansi, which is Set in ancient Kemet. Yao, which is Heru in ancient Kemet. Abba, which is Nekabet, as we said earlier. Ya, which is Abba. Ya, which is Wachet in ancient Kemet. Afi, which is Het Heru in ancient Kemet. She's also called Feet in ancient Kemet as well. Amen Men, which is also called Amen Men in ancient Kemet and so forth. And they also govern the 11 major body systems: endocrine, reproductive, lymphatic, immune, renal, nervous, cardiovascular, respiratory, as we talked about with Nekabet, digestive, exocrine, skeletal, and so forth. But what happens is when we're born, for example, I'm born on a Sunday, Awusida, governed on the masculine side by Awusi or Alsar. So Kwasi or Kwesi means the servant, Kwa, of the divinity, Awusi or Awusir, Alsar, and so forth. If you're born on Benada, the Da of the divinity Benna, which is Tuesday, operating through the planet Benna, so-called Mars, the red fiery energy, the divinity of war, hot metal, and so forth. He is Benna in Akan, he's Heru Bedat in ancient Kamit, Herakuti or Heru Bedat, and Bedat became Benna in Akan. He is Ogun in Yoruba, for example. If you're born on Benada, Tuesday in the male, that means you were assigned to that divinity before you came into the world in the spirit realm. That divinity governs your head, your kayat, and so forth. And when you're born into the world on his day, that is an indication to the community that he governs your head. So when you're born on his day, Benada Tuesday, you're like, okay, this child is the child of the deity Benna, because Benna made sure he came through on his day to let us know that. And of course, we divine with the divinity to confirm it, but of course, that's one of the ways. So the person is called Kwa Benna, a servant Kwa of the divinity Benna. On the female side, a female born on Benada or Abenada, the female divinity is Abena. She's also called Setchima in Akan. Setchima is pronounced Setchimat or Setchimet or Sekhimet or Sekmet in ancient Kemet. Same divinity. She's also called Benna in ancient Kemet as well. So a female born on Abenada is called Abena. So if you know somebody named Abena, that means her head is governed, her spiritual head, her soul, divine consciousness, her ka'et is governed by the female divinity Abena or Setchima Sekmet. And she came into the world to bring that fiery, purificatory energy into the human sphere, the Afurakani, Afurakaini human sphere. So the same is true of the different days of the week in the Akan tradition. So the divinity that governs your head regulates your functioning in creation. You came into the world as a vessel of that divinity to bring that energy into the community. Somebody else brings another energy into the community, somebody else another energy into the community, and it's a holistic configuration representative of all the divinities and forces of nature in that community. So you have a balanced community. If you live out of harmony with divine order and you're trying to make the right decisions and so forth, then you divine. If you can't hear internally what the divinity that governs your head is trying to show you, then sometimes when that is kind of blurry and you can't really get to it, but you want to know what you should be engaged in and what you should stay away from, and you can't hear what the divinity Benna or Abena or Afua or Akua and so forth is telling you internally, then you go to the Okomfo or Abosomfo, the priest or priestess and so forth, and they can show you through divination externally what the divinity has been trying to tell you internally all along. Whether or not your thoughts, intentions, and or actions are in alignment with divine order. Are they measured against the standard of divine law and shown to be reflective of divine order? So divination is about attuning to the divinity within you that governs your head and every function or every action that you have to execute in the world, rooted in your function. Is it in harmony with divine law or not? We can show mathematically whether or not the thoughts, intentions, and or actions you are about to engage in or you're contemplating, if you measure them against the standard, the intain, the straightness, the plumb of divine law and balance, you can determine whether or not it's in harmony, if it's in balance. If it's not in balance, then you don't engage in the behavior. If it is in balance, you engage in the behavior, you move forward. So a divinatory practice is simply divining the heart, attuning to the heart, and showing the individual what's in your heart right now. Is it in alignment? Your heart is the repository of all of the energetic projections coming from the outside and what you've generated from within. So is it in harmony with divine order? Is it in alignment with the divinity that governs the head? The plumb line goes from the head, the spirit's brain, down to the heart. If the heart is out of harmony with the brain and so forth, if the bayat, operating within the ab, the heart, is out of harmony with the brain and so forth, the kayat, then you have to make adjustments. If you can't hear it, if you can't see it because you're stressed, you're anxious, you're trying to attune to the forces of nature that govern you and you can't hear it, you try to attune to your nananon samanfo, your spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, and you can't hear it, then you go to the diviner, the ADEBISA fo, and then you get that information. They show you externally through patterns and through ritual processes what's going on internally. Sometimes they simply get possessed by the divinity and they speak directly to you as well. So let me touch on one more thing before we get into the question and answer section. All right. So this is one of our books. And in fact, let me just so for people who are unaware of the work that we are doing, so on our publications page on our website, odwirafo.com, you'll see that we have some image here. So to date, I've written and published 31 books. We have some more books coming out this year, but I have 31 books that I've published to date. And when you go to the Unhoma page, the publications page, you will see all of the different books that we're talking about. All of the 31 books, the ebook versions, you can download for free. And we're actually moving we've always sold the softcover versions. We were printing them ourselves in-house. We're moving them as far as the softcover versions to Amazon. We're making that transition. In the meantime, so they'll be available on Amazon and so forth through our website on Amazon. But the ebook versions, we've always made those free, so you can download all of these 31 books at any time. And one of them we're going to touch on. This, for example, is when I talked about Ra and Ra'et. This is Ra'et. This is Ra. We have a whole book about Ra and Ra'et. They're called in Yonkumpon and in Yonkunton. In the Alkan tradition, so we show the cosmology of Ra and Ra'et, showing the Creator and Creatress. We also talk about Amen and Amenet and so forth, but that's just one of them, but we have a number of different books. One of them that we're going to touch on right now is the Sankofa Tehuti book. Tehuti Sankofa Fa and Ifa, we're showing that Tehuti, the male divinity of divine wisdom, and Akan, one of his titles is Sankofa. In Yoruba, he's called Ifa. In Vodun, he's called Fa. In Akan, he's called Sankofa. He's also called Fa in ancient Kamit. And just so you can see that quick before we go to the term Fa, T, that means he of the T of the font, font. And here they write it fent, but they didn't have the proper vowel vocalization. It's really F-N-T, font or fanti. But font is the term, and let's go back up real quick. This is actually written font, and it says nose, as you can see, nose, font. And then font-T is like saying fontish, like nosy, the one of the nose, one who has the nose-y, nose-ish. Font means nose. Font-T means nosy, of he of the nose, and so forth. So font-T, the root of it is font, the nasal N, font, he of the nose. One of the 42 judges in the Hall of Alsar, a name of Thoth or Tehuti. Fanti, which is font, he of the nose, meaning the great beak and so forth, a form of Tehuti, one of the 42 assessors of Alsar, one of the judges of divine wisdom. The reason why it's he of the great, quote unquote, nose and so forth, of course, the sacred animal totem for the divinity is the habwi bird or the crane and so forth, the ibis, the habwi. When you see him scraping and scratching and grabbing, something from under the surface. The term foi in Akan, foi means to scrape or to scratch. So you see the one, he of the great beak, font, scraping or scratching. He's scraping and going under the surface to go what is under the surface and pull out what is under the surface. When we engage in the divinatory process, we go beyond the surface. We scrape or scratch to go under the surface to see what's undergirding what's taking place in the world of the seen. We want to go into the world of the unseen and pull out one of those gems. So you see different forms of divination when someone is grabbing and scraping up stones or shells and then casting and so forth. There's scraping or scratching, just like the great hot weavers scraping the surface to get up underneath the surface to understand what's the shaping factors spiritually, what forces in nature, what abosom are contributing to this situation. How do we need to align with them? So he's the great one of the nose, scraping and scratching to go under the surface. We show in this book the divinatory process, the original pendulum divination and so forth. This is a divination scene, not just a weighing of the heart scene, but you're looking at divination taking place. And Tehuti, he of the nose, is taking note of the weighing as the divine scribe, and then he will announce to the panel of, tribunal of divinities who are the outcome of the weighing of the heart. And in this case, he passed the weighing, so he lives in harmony with divine order. He's accepted into the ancestral realm. But again, one of the titles of Tehuti is Tekh. In Akan, he's called Bre Chini Huruade, which means he can see in front of and behind him in the past and the future and so forth. But he's also called Tekh in Akan. And we saw Tekh means straight and upright and so forth. But there's an entire, sacred ritual drum text in Akan culture talking about the divinity Tekh. So we were just showing there that his same name in Akan, Tekh, is his title in ancient Kamit is Tekh and so forth. Same title. We're also showing in Akan that when you look at the spokesperson or the mouthpiece of the sovereign with the staff, the Ocheme or Ocheame and so forth, he is the one who speaks the wisdom of the sovereign. Tehuti has the same position with the same staff, and he's also called Ocheame. Ocheme in ancient Kemet is Ocheame in Akan. He is the spokesperson or the mouthpiece, the one who speaks the divine wisdom of Amen and Amenet, as well as Ra and Ra'et. He has the same position in Akan with the same name, Ocheame, the spokesperson of the sovereign, same position in ancient Kemet with the staff, the spokesperson, the mouthpiece, the one who enunciates the divine law, divine wisdom of the sovereign, the king and queen mother. So then we get into the male and female divinity of divine law and balance, Tehuti, also called Tekh, and then Seshat, the female divinity of divine wisdom and divination and divine law and so forth. You have Ma'an, Maat is the codification or codification of the law, and Tehuti and Seshat, they are the spokesperson. They announce or enunciate what the divine wisdom is at any moment, in any situation, at any time, and so forth. So you have the law. How does the law apply to a specific situation? Ma'an, Ma'at concretize or codify or codify the law. Tehuti and Seshat, like, judges and so forth, will show how the law that has been codified or codified is applied to any situation. This is why they're the male and female force that govern divination and wisdom. It's when you have Ifa, divination, and so forth, Afa and Fa and so forth, and the same thing with the Abe and Akan and so forth, as we talk about it in the book. We're talking about these male and female forces of divine wisdom, how they apply divine law to every situation in life. And we're showing the sacred palm tree is called Abe and Akan, the shrine of the divinities of divine wisdom. The palm kernel, of course, is used in Vodun. It's the sacred Fa. It's called the sacred palm tree. And atop that palm tree is Badu. And the legba goes up the palm tree and so forth to open up her eyes and so forth and close them. And that's the divination system. But that's the palm tree. In Yoruba, you have the palm nuts and so forth used for divination. You see the Ierosun, or the divination powder, on the Opunifa, the divination tray, and they scrape or scratch like Tehuti scraping or scratching to make these symbols and so forth. So whether it's the palm kernel there in Yoruba, the palm tree in Vodun, the Abe, or the palm tree in Akan, or the palm tree for the divinity of wisdom in ancient Kamit, Tehuti and Seshat, they're holding palm fronds and they're measuring time in the universe, sacred time and so forth, and all things that fit in sacred time in the universe and so forth. They're marking that off with a palm frond. And when you see Seshat, she has the palm tree on her head. The palm tree is utilized, of course, for divination. So that's the palm tree. Some fools tried to say that was a marijuana leaf, which is ridiculous because they don't know the cosmology and why this palm tree is so sacred. She has the palm tree on her head. She's holding the palm frond. And in every one of these traditions, you will see the palm tree, the palm nut is utilized for divination practices to communicate with the male and female force of divine wisdom. So just going to scroll down real quick. And we also show a relationship when you see Tehuti, the sacred Habwi animal totem, and you see Anan, which is the sacred baboon and so forth, and he's proffering the eye of Heru, the Uchat Heru, which is a divinatory instrument. So you have the sacred, divinity of wisdom and his assistant, the baboon. In our Khan culture, when you have going to a shrine of an Obosomfo, a high priest, just like Tehuti is the high priest, you will see the Mara, the little monkey with the bowl. He has a divination bowl, the assistant to the high priest. So the monkey with the bowl, the divination bowl, and so forth, the bowl is looked into for divinatory practices and so forth, like water gazing and so forth. You have the monkey who's the assistant to the high priest in Akan with the divination bowl. You have the monkey who's the assistant to the high priest in ancient Kemet with the divination bowl. We also talk about Orumila, who's also called Ifa in Yoruba, and his sacred assistant is the colobus monkey called Edun. And we go into that whole story in this book. So in each culture, you have the high priest whose assistant is the monkey who assists with divination. And that's important because you see once again, Anpu looking at the plummet, looking at the Tekh. It's a blown up picture of that. At the equilibration point, sometimes you will see the female divinity Maat with her feather. But sometimes you will see that same monkey, the divinity Ma'at, and he's sitting at the equilibration point, and the feather of Ma'at is in the pan. And once again, in a different papyrus, you see Maat herself sitting in the pan, and you see Ma'al, her male companion, sitting on the equilibration point, the balancing point of the scale. And from ancient Kamit Nubia, you see Maat sitting in the pan, and you see Ma'al sitting on the equilibration point. And here, Heru is looking at the Tekh, and so forth. So we're just showing the role of the male divinity Ma'al sitting on the straight line, straightness, Ma'al, balance, integrity, judgment, divine law, and so forth. Now, let me go to this final piece with regard to a more detailed definition of divination. And for that, we're going to go to our page. So this is our page on one of our pages on our website. We're talking about our divination, our form of divination in Akwamu and Marukati Mudi Akwamu Nation, North America, specifically within Hoodoo Jasedine, our Hoodoo shrine house, our temple, and so forth. One of the major forms of divination that we utilize. So we're talking about ADEBISA, that's the Akan term for divination. So we talk about the term bisa. Bisa means to inquire. Adebisa means things, adye, that are inquired about. Bisa, to call. Bisa means to go, call. Bisa, consult or inquire. That means consult. If someone says medico bisa, that means I am going to inquire, meaning I'm going to the Abosom, the deities. I'm going to the Nananom Nsamanfo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, to inquire. So that's the reason why we use the term Adebisa for divination. So we give a proper definition of what divination actually is. And now, because we went through all that cosmology, you can understand it better. We say through Adebisa divination, one learns from the Abosom, the deities, the forces in nature that regulate all of creation, the spirit forces that animate the sun, moon, stars, black substance of space, planets, oceans, rivers, earth, mother, core of earth, thermosphere, and so forth, every aspect of creation. Through Adebisa, one learns from the Abosom, the forces in nature, the same as Orisha and Yoruba, and Vodou, and Ntoru too, misnomer, Neteru too, but the forces in nature. We learn from the forces in nature and the Nananom Nsamanfo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, the nature of past, present, and potential future circumstances and events in relation to our thoughts, intentions, and actions as measured against the standard of Nyamewa, Nyame, and Sheshe, meaning the great mother and great fathers, divine order. So, once again, when you engage in divination, if someone is using a pendulum, the Tekh to divine for you, to see, find out externally what the divinity that governs your head, and of course this is for Afurakani, Afurakaitni, African Black people only, because only our people have a divinity governing our head. The whites in our offspring don't have that. Whether they're white Europeans, white Americans, white Asians, white Hindus, white Arabs, white pseudo-Native Americans, white Hispanics, none of them have a divinity governing their head. Only Black people have that. That's our spirit genetic inheritance, which separates us from all other groups and so forth. So, because we have a divinity governing our head, and within that divinity in our head region, the blueprint of what our life should be, how we should function in the world, what's in harmony with order for us, what is out of harmony in order, out of harmony of order, from order with regard to us, that blueprint is within our spiritual head. If we can't hear the divinity internally, We go to the priest or priestess, the Okomfo, Abosomfo, and so forth, and they can tell us externally what the divinity has always been showing us, what the Nsamafo has been showing us. They show us externally what we've been missing internally. But when they're engaged in that process, technically, what's happening? We're learning from the forces in nature and this spiritually cultivated ancestral community, the nature of past, present, and potential future circumstances and events in relation to our thoughts, intentions, and actions as measured against the standard of Nyame wa Nyame and Sheshe, which is divine order. And that standard of measurement is the Tekh, the Plumb, the plummet, the plumb line, and so forth. What's straight, what's right, what's in dealing with integrity, uprightness, and so forth. Now, so we talk about that, and then we also mention ADEBISA divination is not only about seeking answers to overcome obstacles or exigencies, urgent matters. We use ADEBISA to learn. Just as one can sit down and open up a book or log on to the internet to learn facts about various subjects to study, so do we use ADEBISA to learn about, research, and study any subject imaginable. The Abosom Nanano Nsamanfo, in concert with your Okra, your soul, your divine consciousness, will inform, direct, and position you to come into contact with individuals and information concerning the subject you queried about for confirmation and further study. And then we say oracular divination systems of Afuraka are the original books that we open and continue to open in order to avail ourselves of the knowledge of all things in the physical world and spirit realm. So, for example, if we wanted to know what is the nature of this particular plant, what is the nature and properties of this particular plant that we just came across, and we engage in the divinatory process, divining the spirit that animates the plant, divining with regard to the abosom that governs that particular aspect of plant life or that particular, form of plant life. We find out from the divinity the nature of that plant and so forth, its energetic signature, how it relates to other forms of plant life as well as animal life and mineral life in us. Can we utilize this plant for certain ailments, to overcome certain illnesses or for other matters and so forth, or to poison our enemies? We learn about it, we study it, starting off with divination, opening the book on the plant. Same thing with mineral life, plant life, the nature of gravity, the nature of electromagnetic energy and so forth. We're engaged in divinatory practices to learn the nature of things so that we can expand our awareness of creation, of the universe. And that's how we were able to establish civilization and learn about the nature of all things in creation and build these civilizations, replicating the patterns that exist in nature now. So that's from our divination page, and we and we also touch on that in our Hoodoo Jasedain page. Our shrine house is Hoodoo Jasedain, which is the Hearth Shrine of Akan ancestral religion in North America. Once again, the Hoodoo tradition is the Akan tradition in North America. So when we're talking about, when you see our page and we're talking about the different clans and so forth and what Hoodoo is and why we call it Jasedain and so forth, we also touch on, by the way, we have an annual Hoodoo Mind, Hoodoo Nation festival dealing with the Hoodoo tradition. When we talk about our divination services, you see Ama Maat Keru Aberewa Maati, one of the diviners, and then of course myself and our divination services. You'll see that when we're talking about divination on this page and the other page, we're talking about, this is what we're talking, this detailed description of what divination actually is. Okay. So I know we have some questions in the chat room on Zoom, as well as on YouTube and so forth in live chat. So I want to look through some of the information real quick. And as we're going through that, so as a matter of fact, let me show this real quick also. So some of you may be aware, some of you may not be aware, depending on who's been in tune with what we're doing. So now, how many of you, if you look on the chat room, as well as in Zoom, some of you know, but some of you are unaware, we have not only we published 31 books, but I've also produced 2 documentary films. The first film we produced a few years ago, Odwirafo ADEBISA, African American Ancestral Divination. And I'll put this link in the chat room, by the way. Let me put this link in the chat room. So I'll put this link, the PayHip link, in the chat room. You can access both of our films. So in the YouTube live chat, I want to put this in here. Okay, so Odwirafo ADEBISA, African American Ancestral Divination. We released that a few years ago, and we actually won an award for Best Original Documentary. We were at the Kwanzaa Film Festival in New York. And we also were at the Pembroke Tapparelli Film Festival, Art and Film Festival in California. We were able to, have the film screened there, sat on a panel dealing with ancestral religion and race and social justice and so forth. This particular film, myself, as well as Voodoo Queen Kalinda Laveau out of New Orleans, Seshat Tut Ankh Wajet out of Florida, Rekit Kajara near Yad Nebet Het out of Georgia, and then Mama Mawusi Ashakir out of Cincinnati, Ohio. She represents the Juju tradition, which is Yoruba tradition preserved in the blood circles of our people in North America. So just like the Orisha tradition was preserved in Cuba as Lukumi and Candomblé in Brazil, it was preserved as Juju in North America. And the Juju man and Juju woman are the priests and priestesses in the Yoruba tradition for hundreds of years in North America. We didn't lose the tradition. For those who are Yoruba, Kajara near Yanebet Het is a Rekit. The Ngangan tradition, or sometimes they will say Nganga in the Congo, but Ngangan or Gangang in the Fang tradition of the people, F-A-N-G, the Fang people of Gabon and Cameroon, preserve their ancestral religious practices under Ngangang. You even hear people say gang and gang and so forth. Ngangang is the term for the priest or priestess and diviner and so forth. In the Fang tradition, we preserve that in North America. Seshat Tut Ankh Wajet, she's Gullah, and part of that Gullah constellation is the Ovambo tradition, which is Wanga. So you hear people saying throwing the Wanga and so forth. She is from that tradition, preserved that in North America for the past hundreds of years. Voodoo Queen Kalinda Laveau, the Voodoo tradition did not come from Haiti 100 years before the Haitian Revolution. That was in 1804 and so forth. But 100 years prior to that, Voodoo was already in Louisiana. It came directly from the continent. Some of our people were forced into, the Ewe people forced into Louisiana. They continued to practice the Voodoo tradition, mainly the Ewe expression, and that was preserved for 300 plus years in the blood circles of people, our people in North America, as the Voodoo tradition. And of course, I'm representing the Akan tradition. Those of us who are Akan, who were forced over here, we continued Akan ancestral religion under the Akan term Undu, which means medicine from roots, trees, and plant life. Undu came to be pronounced hoodoo in North America. In this film, we talk about the different forms of divination that were preserved in our blood circles over the past 300 plus years in North America. So we travel to Ohio and Georgia and Florida and New Orleans and so forth. And you'll hear from all of the sisters as well as myself on how their form of divination was preserved in North America. That film is available. You can get that now. It's $11.11. So in October, a few years ago, we released that film. And then this past October, we released our second documentary film, Hoodoo, Arcana, Ancestral Religion in North America. So we go into detail specifically on the hoodoo tradition in general. We talk about the Akan origin of the terms hoodoo and mojo and jack or jackball and kanche, which became kanje and conjure and so forth, and the haint spirits and so forth. We travel to ancient Kamit, we travel to Ghana, and of course, in North America, we're showing the various expressions of the hoodoo tradition, all these different forms of, different expressions in hoodoo are actually from the Akan tradition. So we released this film this past October, just a few months ago, still brand new. People are just finding out about the film. You can access that now, $13.31. You can access both films for $24. You can access that at any time. We've had great reviews. We're submitting the film to a number of the Black film festivals. We'll be hearing back from those, and they will be at film festivals around the country and so forth. We're also working to get the film, on streaming services. But in the meantime, you can access it directly. All the, reviews so far have been great reviews on the film. Okay. Oh, and there was one other piece I want to show real quick. And we will put this in the chat room as well. Okay, we have a new 6-week online course beginning this Joda, which is the Akan term for Monday, this Monday. It's going to be a 6-week course every Monday for 6 weeks at 8 p.m. on Zoom. You can sign up for this course, AKRADINBOSOM-ODWIRA. So we talk about the 7-day week, the male and female divinities that govern the 7-day week. There are Akan names for these deities, but every tradition has a name for these divinities that govern the 7-day week, which governs all natural cycles in creation. These 11 divinities also, as we said before, govern the 11 major body systems and so forth. Everybody is connected to one of these 11 divinities, male or female. And we're talking about daily purificatory ritual, whether it's ritual song, ritual dance, meditation, ritual movement, divination, and so forth, how we engage the purificatory process on a daily basis. If you look at people spend billions of dollars on, psychotropic medications, therapy, all these different things that people are going through, mental health and so forth. The original priests and priestesses, there are certain titles of priests and priestesses in ancient Kemet. One of them is Chedet for the male and Chedepit for the female, means a guide or leader, a certain class of priest or priestess. Chedapit came to be corrupted into Chedapi and therapist or therapist and so forth. The original therapist who engages in therapy comes from the Chedapit in ancient Kemet. Our priests and priestesses and elders and eldresses, the Mpanyinfo, are the counselors, the priests, the priestesses, and so forth. When we engage our ancestral religious practices, we don't have to seek counsel from pseudo practices of psychology. We have the actual real practices. In psychology, you have a Western framework. They have a certain worldview. If your behavior doesn't fit into that worldview and they can't force you into certain forms of behavior and so forth, then they'll just simply medicate you. and put you on medication that causes more problems than, you know, than it solves. So people don't need to be engaged in that when we have everything in our culture we need to remedy any of our issues. So we engage in daily ritual practices, no different than if you get up on just a mundane level, you get up, you purify yourself, you exercise, you eat certain foods and so forth to strengthen yourself, purify yourself, fuel yourself, so you can engage the world in a certain fashion. If you have problems, you know, hopefully you utilize holistic medicine and so forth. In the same fashion, we purify our spirits, purify our consciousness, clear our spiritual head and so forth with this daily purificatory ritual. And we deal with how each one of these 11 divinities that govern each day of the week, what is the ritual, purificatory ritual associated with each day of the week in relation to these different divinities that are a holistic set of forces that govern all natural cycles in creation, including your 11 major body systems and your functioning in the world. How do you want to bring balance to yourself? If you find imbalance in different aspects of your life and so forth, we don't go to the European who is by nature imbalanced. We go to our own culture. The forces in nature regulate divine order and balance in creation. When we align with them, we can bring divine order and balance to our physical bodies, emotional, mental, spiritual, and communal. So this is what we're saying here. So there are Ojira purificatory ritual practices connected to each one of the days of the week, aligned with the male and female abosom of the day. Through this process, we maintain physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual balance within ourselves that we may function in the world in a balanced fashion. That includes Susu, which is meditation, Mpayi, ritual prayer, Adebisa, divination, and more. So that's 6-week course. The first 6 weeks will deal with the introduction and the first 5 deities. And then the second 6 weeks will deal with the remaining 6 deities. So the first part 1 is February 12th through March 18th, once a week on Monday. If you miss a day, miss a week, of course, we record all the sessions so you have access to the recording. So part 1, February 12th through the 18th. Our courses are 6 weeks. It's $4 a week, which is $24 for the 6-week course. For part 1 and $24 for part 2, which is $48. But if you buy both together, you can get them for $40, parts 1 and part 2. Or you can, purchase part 1, $24 for the first 6 weeks, and then you can wait and purchase part 2 for the second, for $24 for the second 6-week cycle. But part 1 begins this Monday, Joda, February 12th. So if you would like to get into that class, of course, it's open to Afurakani, Afurakani, and African Black people only, as all of our classes are. So, but please, you can sign up for that now. Go to the website, and we'll put that link in the chat room. And now we'll get to the questions. Let me put this in the chat room first. Second. Okay, so that's the Akongwa Suya page on our website. And with regard to that page, you will see parts 1 and part 2 we talked about. But if you look on your page, you'll see that we've already taught 38 online courses, and they're in alignment with 31 books we published, as well as articles and other information that we have not published yet, but we introduced in the courses in addition to the books. So we have 38 online courses already archived. So if you'd like to access those, you can look on the page and you will see the flyers for those 38 courses. And you'll see all of those different courses, and you can access whichever ones you want. But this new course that's starting Monday, part 1, and then part 2 a few weeks later. That'll be 39th and 40th. So in total, we'll have 40 courses. But right now, the archive, we have 38 archive courses and so forth. So, but that's the Akongwa Suya page on our website. And the new class is the AKRADINBOSOM-ODWIRA. All right. Second. Okay, I just want to go through some of the information I see in the chat room on Zoom first, and then I'll get on the YouTube. I just want to make sure I didn't miss a question. One second, let's see. Okay. Okay, so yes. So that first part, just looking through, yes, so the person, that was one thing that we wanted to bring out, that this, the Tekh itself, quote unquote, plumb line, plummet, and so forth, and the Tekh at the end of it, that is the original pendulum. And of course, that scene, the wing of the heart, is actually a divination scene. Now, just want to go through to make sure I didn't miss any questions. Okay. Okay, does your course also go speak on the Orisha and the Vodou spiritual system? Yes, and let me show you and switch over right quick. If you recall on the AKRADINBOSOM page, okay, so when we were talking about the bosom of the 7 days of the week, and the names like Kwesi and Kwadwo and Kofi and Afu and so forth, you also see that we have the chart of the names of the divinities in the Akan tradition. We'll see in Ajwa and Bena Abena Awuku Akua Yao Ya Aba Afi Amemen. And their names in the Yoruba tradition, Obatala, Odua, was Ajua, Ogun, and Iyami Abini, which is Bena and Abena. Eshu and Agberu. Agberu is the female Orisha, the wife of Eshu and so forth. She's the one that carries the basket with the offerings and so forth, just like Eshu is the messenger. She's the one that carries the offerings. He carries the messages. Shango, Oya, and Oba is Yao, Ya, and Aba in Akan. Afi was also called Cheche in Akan is Oshun in Yoruba. And Amenmen is called Orisha Oko in Yoruba. And then we show Dangbe and Minona and Ogu and Ananu, Legba and Koni, Hebioso, Avejida, Ayaba, Azili, which is Erzuli and Azaka and Vodou. And then, of course, their names in ancient Kemet and so forth. So whenever we're talking about the Abosom, the Akan tradition, we'll show the relationship with the Orisha and the Vodou and their expressions in ancient Khanid and Kemet as well. And we do the same thing, for example, in our book on Tehuti, Fa, Nifa, and so forth. So, for example, when we're talking about the divinatory practices, we're talking about the palm nuts in Dafa, and then we showed the Abe, the palm tree, as a divinatory shrine in Akan, and then the palm tree called Fa in Vodun, and the palm tree with Tehuti and Seshat, the male and female force of divine wisdom and so forth. And we talk about the Ibeji is Ma'an Maat and Orumila and Edun, the male colobus monkey and so forth, and that whole story about, the first Ibeji and the female Ibeji and the male Ibeji and the female Edun and the male Edun and so forth. So we always make those correspondences so people can have a better understanding. And they inform one another. When you study Yoruba cosmology and you get some detailed information about that, it informs studying Akan cosmology. When you study Akan cosmology, you'll see insight into the Yoruba tradition as well. When you see, Akua was the, one dealing with the messenger, the divine courier, and so forth, and carrying the offerings back and forth. Then you see Agbero, the wife of the messenger and trickster. She's the courieress who carries the offerings and so forth. And you see Nebuchadnezzar with her basket on her head, and she's the divine courieress and so forth. And Koni, the wife of the Legba Vodun, and she's the courieress. You'll see that they all inform one another because they're talking about the same divinity. Okay. Where can I find more information on the Ba and rituals I can use to harness my energy? Where can I find more information on the deities' connection to the planets and physical body systems? So in the AKRADINBOSOM, of course, that's what we're going to be dealing with. So for example, on this particular page, you see volume 1 of our book, AKRADINBOSOM. You see volume 2, free downloads. We're working on the next few volumes of the book. We put those back because we were working on the film and so forth. But we have the other volumes coming out in the meantime, because we dealt with Awusi and Ajua, the first 2. But then in the meantime, when you scroll down, you will see on that page, we have articles on all 11 deities. That includes, their function in the world, the 11 major body systems and all that. But we go into more detail about that in the course that's coming up that we're talking about, the Kongwasuya course. I'm sorry, the AKRADINBOSOM course. That's coming up on Monday. So we'll be talking about the Ba item. We'll be talking about those 11 divinities that govern all natural cycles, the 11 major body systems, and daily ritual practices associated with them. So that's all coming up. And this is a brand new course that we have not taught before. That's coming up starting Monday. That course, we will touch on the Ba, but also, just so you know, one of the courses that we did, one of the archive courses, is this one. Ba'u, which is plural for Ba, the seven spirits of Ra and Ra'et. So there are, in the text of ancient Kamit, we talk about seven. Ba'u was seven spirits, the seven Ba of Ra. And we talk about these seven spirits and how they animate the seven karu, or so-called chakras and so forth. So you have the soul, which is the Ka, and you see the little two arms that represent the Ka spirit, and then the Ba is inside of that. So you have the Ba and the Ka, meaning the spirit and the soul. But those seven Ba spirits illuminate and animate the Karu. And just so you can see what we're talking about when we talk about the Karu, one of our books, which we touch on in the course. One of our books, one of the more popular books that we have, just because of the nature of the subject matter, is this book, Ankh, The Origin of the Term Yoga, Karakasa, The Origin and Nature of the Chakra. Second. And that book is a free download. But one of the things we talk about is the etymological origin of the term Ankh, or Ankh, which became Yonk and Yoke and so forth. Ankh or Yonk became Yunk in Proto-Indo-European. Ankh became Yonk, and Yonk became Yong and Yonka, and later Yuka and Yoga, but it comes from Yoke, which is a corruption of Yonk. And we show the whole etymology and the yoke around the neck and so forth. As you can see, one of the spellings of Ankh is a symbol itself, and the aboa, or the goat, with the yoke around its neck, and the Ankh is a yoke itself. The Ankh is a yonk or yoke. And we show the cosmology of the term Ankh is yoke or yoke, yoking the Ba and the Ka together, the spirit and the soul. And then we also, so that's something that people were unaware of. They didn't know the origin of the term Ankh. They thought it came from the Sanskrit language in India, which it did not. And then we show the term Karakara, which was corrupted into Kakara and later Chakra, but it's Karakara thousands of years before the Hindus started utilizing that. And it means shrine, but it also means sacred. There's 7 sacred knots talked about in the ancient Kamit and so forth, and the divinities that govern those sacred knots inside the body. And we show that the Karakara, there's 7 Karakara, is the corruption of the chakra and so forth. So we touch on that in the Ba course, but also we're going to be dealing with that in this upcoming course in detail beginning Monday, because it's directly related. You know, expanding and contracting the Ba'et energy, the divine living energy, is part of that ritual purification process. It's through the Ba, the divine living energy, we connect our Ba, just like a sun ray travels 93 million miles to touch you and so forth, and you breathe that air in and that solar energy, and it fills up your entire being. That divine living energy of Ra and Ra bathes us, and there's a bridge of energy that we make with the bosom, and they travel across that bridge of energy for spirit possession, as well as for us to expand that energy for healing practices, as well as divination and meditation and everything else. Expansion and contraction of that divine living energy, the Ba'et force, is central to real ritual. The Whites and Offspring don't have that, so they can't engage in real ritual. They can imitate things that we do, but they can't connect with the forces in nature. So they're just, you know, engaged in imitation. It's like somebody having a cell phone and they see someone speaking on the cell phone and communicating with somebody, you know, across the country, and then they go grab a piece of plastic that looks like a phone and start talking, but they have no connection. They look like they're doing the same thing, but they're not connecting with anything because they don't have an actual energetic link. So people can imitate what we do. They can meditate, they can engage in ritual song and drumming and ritual dances and so forth, but no deity is going to possess one of the Black individuals, no spiritually cultivated ancestor or ancestress have ever or will ever possess them. So that's the reality. All right. Okay, hold on 1 second. I want to make sure I'm not missing. All right, so the quick question is, horns on the goat. Animal totemism per se is a representative to deep meditation, thought, and growing in etheric meditation, like plants growing also in plant totemic based meditation. So it's connected to that because you'll see, let me show you an image of the crown, one of the crowns. Okay. So one of the forms of the divinity Amen, and even before we get to, let me see, before we get to Amen right quick, let's, we always have to mention this on our Akanfo Nana Som page, for those who are unaware. So Amen, sometimes called Amen Ra, but this is Amen, the great father of creation, the male divinity, male aspect of the supreme being. And then this is Amenet, the great mother of creation, the female supreme being. So there's a great father and great mother, and they work together as one divine unit to create the universe. Just like your father and mother are two halves of a whole, when they interlinked to function as a unit to bring you into the world, but they are two separate entities. That's because that's the foundation of creation. Amen and Amenet, the great mother and great father, unite to create the universe and so forth. So, but let's get back to one of the sacred animal totems of Amen is the great ram or Ba. So you'll see that great ram, you see the horns and so forth. But then when you look at the, let's see if I can find a better picture. Okay. Just so you can see, a lot of people pointed that out, but when you see the horns, you'll see that within the brain and so forth. See certain structures within the brain. And of course, they're going to try to use Europeans for that. The hippocampus, Amun's horn, and so forth, you'll see that inside the brain. So the same thing with Kepra, the Beal, and so forth. And you see the cranium, you'll see that these divinities, Atum, Atumet, Kepra, Keprit, and the sacred horns of Amen and Amenet and so forth are found within the different structures within the brain. So we get into some of that when we're talking about Susu or meditation in the class. All right. Just want to check to make sure we didn't miss anything else. Okay. Okay, so once again, we just wanted to give that information out so people who are unaware, um, okay, one more question that was saying, okay, so can a body part be used as a pendulum as asked in the first question? So now let me know what context you're using now. Of course, and you'll see this in one of the more popular texts in Kamit, where they're enumerating the different parts of the body associated with different divinities. You can find it in the Runu Pert and Meru. So every organ shrine is a shrine. Every system is a shrine for a divinity and so forth. So these are like the physical, just like the chakras or kara are the shrines of different divinities. Every organ and organ system is a shrine for certain abosom, orisha, hoodoo, and so forth. So yes, you're actually divining organs. And people even talk about, you'll hear people talking about talking to their organs and so forth. What they're really just saying is ADEBISA. They're talking about divination. Just like you can go to a physical shrine of a divinity on earth, to a cave, tree, river, and so forth. You give an offering to a certain river. The spiritual force that animates the river, you give an offering, you align yourself with that force in creation so you can communicate with that force through spirit possession or spirit communication. That's a shrine in nature for a divinity. But internally, your organs and systems are shrines for these divinities as well. So in that context, the pendulum is an instrument. In the same context, the organs, glands, systems are, instruments as well to communicate through. And it goes beyond just something as simple as, for example, acupuncture. There's electromagnetic energy that emanates from everything, just like a magnet, but everything has, atoms with protons and neutrons and electrons and so forth, and electrons orbiting and generating a magnetic field and so forth. So there's electromagnetic energy emanating from everything. And you can have instruments that pick up the electromagnetic energy of, anything, including, acupuncture and so forth. When we're talking about divination, we're not just talking about the residual energy that's gleaned from electromagnetic projections. We're talking about communicating with a force in nature. So, for example, you can have a shrine, you can have a sculpture of an Akuaba doll, for example. And let's show an example of that. You can have a shrine of an Akuaba doll. And we show here that the Akuaba and the Ankh is the same symbol, and not only just a regular Ankh, but Ankhs are also anthropomorphized with arms and hands and so forth, and sometimes legs and feet. So it's not just the regular Ankhs that you typically see. You see Ankit, the living one, the name of a goddess. That Ankit is actually Akua. So you can have a shrine like that, and there's electromagnetic energy moving through that form, just by virtue of the fact that, energy is moving through that geometric form. It generates a certain, field of energy. That's on anything. But when you invoke Nebihet, who is Nana Akua in Akan and Agberu in Yoruba, and Koni Koni in Vodun, Akua Ben Akan, the spirit Akua Nebihet will come down and take up residence in that shrine space temporarily to communicate directly with you through spirit possession or spirit communication, so you can deal with the actual divinity. anybody can feel some electromagnetic energy coming off of something, or they can have an instrument that does that. And even some people with a pendulum, if they're not connected to the actual bosom, like the White's neural spring, if they're not connected, all they're going to pick up on is electromagnetic energy, no different than you put two magnets near each other with the like polarities facing, and they push one another across the table without touching. They're just picking up on a field. You know, people are breathing in and out. You have an electromagnetic field surrounding you, just like the, magnetosphere of Earth, the magnetic belts and so forth. You have that. If you're anxious and your energy is not projecting well, or if you're very expansive, you can make the little pendulum move around. But that's not what we're divining about. We're communicating with an actual divinity. They have no capacity to do that. So we're talking about something on a much deeper and real level. So. Okay. One more question in the chat room on Zoom. I know shapes and symbols resonates on higher planes like body parts, adinkras, scarab, ankh, jet, and pendulums. I would like to learn more about that subject, as it is a quantum motion. Do you have a book that goes into that deeply? I didn't see that subject. We talk about it in general in the Ubin Shang. In the HOODOO courses, we talk about that to a certain extent with regard to the adinkra and with the AKRADINBOSOM-ODWIRA. And we talked about some of that, but we didn't have a book specifically only dealing with that subject. But we touch on it in the HOODOO courses when we're touching on the adinkra symbols, geometric forms. When energy is projected into these specific geometric forms, the energetic signature that's released is in alignment with the specific divinity that governs that form, and that creates a welcome mat to communicate with that specific divinity. Those are just the mechanics of what's happening when someone utilizes adinkra. For those who are unaware, that's an adinkra symbol. When we utilize geometric forms like adinkra, all of them are associated with specific abosom. So effectively what we're doing is we're using a specific sign that carries the energetic signature of a specific force in creation. When we utilize that, we create a vortex of energy that's operating in alignment with that divinity's energy. So you make yourself more, it's easier and more receptive to that force in creation. And when we're in alignment with them, they take up residence and communicate with us. Same thing with colors, shapes, sounds, smells, and so forth, but these geometric patterns do the same thing. The Ubin Shang is, hold on a second. Ubin Shang touches on that on one of the pieces. It touches on that, but we don't go into detail. We give the basic foundation, kind of like what I just explained. In the HOODOO courses, and some of them probably part 5 and 6 is where we deal with that in a little bit more detail with regard to adinkra specifically. Okay. So question in the chat room. Why does Yoruba has use of the letter L if we don't use it in ancient times? So it depends on the ethnic group, talking about linguistically. So for example, in our Khan tradition, we don't use the letter L as a rolling R. So like kala, for some groups would be kara or kara. In other groups in ancient Kamit, there wasn't an L, there's a rolling R and so forth, just like in the Akan language today. There's some groups that because of the way they intonate and so forth, they utilize the letter L like the Yoruba people, even though they have both. So for example, they will talk about the term Olorun, which is the masculine aspect of the Supreme Being, Olorun, and Olokun, the female aspect of the Supreme Being, the female Great Mother, Olorun, the Great Father, and so forth. But some Yoruba scholars will say Olorun, they'll say Olo means owner and so forth, and Orun means the sky, and Olo, owner, and Okun means the deep and so forth, associated with the ocean, but the deep, even before the ocean came into being. But some will say it's not just Olo and Okun and Olo and Orun. They'll say it's Oni, Orun. Oni Orun became Oni Orun and Oli Orun and Olorun and so forth, and later became Olorun. But it started off as Oni Orun, Oni Orun, and so forth, and the rolling R made it Olorun, Olorun, Olorun. So there's still that, interchange between, there's an interchange linguistically between the rolling R, the N, the L, and even the D, and so forth. All right. Okay. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and end it here. We went over a little bit longer than we actually had planned to. But once again, I'll say we thank everybody for tuning in. We have a couple of things. Actually, we have an event coming up as well. The next event coming up. Go out and go back in. On the PayHip site, you'll see our 2 films, but you also see that we have coming up February 24th in Birmingham, Alabama. We're going to be screening our film live, having a live film discussion, live screening, discussion of our new film. There'll be vegan food available and so forth. That's at the Crescent Cultural Community Center, February 24th, Birmingham, Alabama. We will be there. As we have more, we're going to be doing a number of screenings in different cities. So as we build that list, we will let people know what's going on. We'll go through a few cities, but we won't be able to go to every city in the country, of course. So the film is now available. Eventually, there will be some streaming sites that the film will be available on, but right now we have it directly on our site. So, and even with the streaming sites, that's just to get the film out to a larger swath of our people. For people who might just be on Amazon or Tubi or Netflix possibly, who are unaware of the things that we're doing, they wouldn't know to look to our website, but it will pop up on the streaming site. But for those of you who know, you can go directly to the film. But we will be doing some screenings in different cities right now. You can access both films for $24 for both, or the HOODOO film itself is $13.31. The Amarukafu Adebisa African American Ancestral Divination is $11.11 available now. And once again, the course starts Monday, so sign up for that. And the final thing I would say for those who are unaware, we just added this recently. So we're going to Kamit. We have an annual trip to Kamit in the late spring in June, but we added just recently an August 20th through August 28th trip to Kamit for a smaller group. Some people weren't able to make it in this coming June. So August 20th through August 28th. We're gonna have about 15 people. We have about 12 spaces left right now. So if you would like to attend that, and this is the time, we even put the information out about Tekh. Let me pull up this. We'll put the link in the chat room. Well, first and foremost, let me put the Adikat is the page. So Adikat Kamit, that's the link to the page. If you would like to reserve your space, you can do that. You can reserve your space with a $300 deposit just to reserve your spot, and then you can make monthly payments, installment. You can determine the amount. You'll see the information on the page and so forth. Everything has to be paid like within 30 days before, or 40 days before the tour date, meaning in July. This is a time that people are doing their taxes and so forth. And we even put out some information previously about the origin of the term. Tax is actually Tekh, and we showed the reason for that. The Tekh determines the value of the balance of the scales, and tax, determines value as well. So Tekh is the origin of the term tax, literally, and we showed the etymology for that. But this is tax time or Tekh time. So some people will put down a deposit and then, a $300 deposit to preserve their space, one of those 12 spots that are left open. And then once you get your tax refund, you can make payments on the trip until you get to the point. So again, 12 spots left. We didn't put that out on the regular page since it's only a small group. We just put that out we sent it out to our people on our email list. And as well as, of course, we're doing this, live, and we let people know on our email list about this live. So, we didn't just post it anywhere. It's more so for people who are in tune with what's already going on, have been doing some studying or familiar of what we're doing. Of course, it's open to Black people only. We don't allow non-Black people on our trips. And it's also for people who are, interested in, going on a study tour to learn some more in-depth information about the culture, and also to go to these shrines that we're talking about. We have a number of videos from the last study tour that we did. So you can see the different places that we will be going and so forth, get an idea of, what will take place on the cruise and the different temples and shrines and everything else. So that link is in the chat. But that one, we just put that out just a couple of weeks ago. So that one, again, we're not doing a big trip for that one. Next summer, we'll do a bigger trip. But for this one, since it's just a late summer trip, as we said, it'll just be about 15 people. We have a few people who took some spaces already, so it's about 12 spots left. So if you want to take one of those, if you want to reserve it, you can just make a $300 deposit to reserve it, and then, make monthly payments then, just so you can snag one of those spaces. Because this is early February and a lot of people got their tax, got their returns and so forth, we're anticipating that people will take those spaces up within the next few days. A lot of people got their, W-2s last week or the week before last, and so now they're filing and they're getting the tax refunds back. So if you want to take a spot, go ahead and do that. Okay, so once again, I'll say we thank everybody for tuning in to this live. And once again, Yebeshia Bio, we will meet again. That's it.